Welcome, everyone. I am Dr. Basil Considine. I am here from the ACU Online Writing Center, and today we are going to talk about writing self-assessments and synthesis as a nursing student. If you are new to the ACU Online Writing Center, we work with students at a variety of different points in your process. We work with students with writing center appointments where you submit a draft or questions to get feedback. We do webinars like this. We are available, of schedules permitting, for phone and Zoom appointments if there are things that you'd like to ask or talk about in person. You've got a long list of questions or something where you're wondering how it looks. And the starting point for an appointment of any type is to go to the WC online scheduling system that's linked in the upper right-hand corner of this slide, and to make an appointment. And as you schedule that appointment, you'll be scheduling for a particular day and time. And that time is when you want to have your materials in. So if you've just got a list of questions, well, that's when you want those questions in. If you are submitting a draft, that's when you want to have the draft in. And we'll go in and review that. And within 24 hours, we will get back to you with our feedback, answers to your questions, comments on your draft, so on and so forth. If you're requesting a phone or Zoom appointment, it works generally easier if you do this at the beginning of the semester rather than at the end. If you want to have a phone appointment on the very last day of week 7 when all the papers are due, that tends to be rather busy. But you can always ask, and usually people will have those questions sooner in the term rather than later. So it doesn't hurt to ask. Just keep in mind that when we get to the end of the semester, we tend to be pretty full up. We also have a lot of resources on the Online Writing Center website, which is linked, that's the last link on the slide. We have examples, we have sample papers, a complete archive of our webinars such as this. Again, the process for scheduling an appointment: you go to WC Online, you make an appointment, and by the time that appointment rolls around, you send us your questions or upload your paper, and then we send you feedback within 24-hour window. That 24 hours is pretty reliable during the school term, but if it's, say, a major holiday weekend like Easter Sunday, we might take a tad longer, but still in time for you to get your feedback well before the submission deadline. Some webinars coming up that might be of interest to you. We have Writing About History this evening at 6 o'clock. Avoiding Plagiarism with APA 7, where we talk about correct ways of citing and acknowledging your sources, how to make sure that you have written things sufficiently in your own words, things like that. That's going to be Tuesday the 2nd. And then on Tuesday the 9th, we have our Beyond Summary, Adding Analysis and Synthesis to Your Writing webinar. Those 3 are being taught by my colleague, Julie Johnson Archer. She will be, in that last one, delving into how you develop your paragraphs, because often at the undergraduate level, you're primarily summarizing information. But as you work through your way through the upper classes or through graduate coursework, there's more and more an expectation you'll be commenting on, you'll be contextualizing, you'll be interpreting. And all of that is analysis and synthesis. And if you don't have them, it's very easy to lose points on assignments. And so it's one of the webinars that I recommend that every student take. It will make you a better writer. And I will be referencing that later because we're going to be talking about synthesis a little bit in this webinar. A new addition to our schedule, we had a lot of students write in with requests that we add another live edit session this term, and that we do one during the lunch hour so that if you are busy in the evenings, you could come in and catch it. So we have added one of those for Thursday, February 11th from 12 to 1 p.m. That's a live edit session where students submit copies of their dissertation or doctoral study drafts. We will look at those, comment on them, and if you volunteered your manuscript, it'll be anonymized, but you'll get a track changes copy and a link to the video afterwards. So it's a great way of seeing ways to refine your writing by looking at how other people's writing that you're not personally emotionally invested in, to see how that's done, and also to get some of the thought process that a committee member and an editor would have in looking at your draft. Some handy dandy resources. We do have a YouTube channel where we are adding a growing number of videos. And with that, let us dive into our main objectives for the day. So this is going to be a briefer lunchtime webinar. We have three main objectives here. We're going to talk about the leadership self-evaluation test that students in the Nursing 701 class will be taking this week. We'll talk about how to cite and write about the results of that webinar. And we're also going to talk about how to add synthesis to your writing, particularly in the context of the assignment this week. So let's delve into that first process. So there's a leadership self-evaluation test that every student in Nursing 701 should be taking this week. And here's the link here. It's run by the company Mind Tools. And some notes about this. Any self-assessment is not intended to be an exhaustive, objective measure of things about you. The point of most self-assessments is to give you a ballpark idea of where you are by certain metrics. And then based on those results and how you feel about them, you can make an informed decision about what you want to do, whether there are things you want to develop, things you say, oh, I'm good at that. I don't need to put so much energy. Look where I've come. And I would make the analogy to when I started seminary and all of the students who were getting who were on the Master of Divinity track to become mostly ordained ministers, they took a very detailed Myers-Briggs personality test. Now you've probably taken a short version online, but this was like you set aside an hour and you go through lots and you have a meeting with a professional analyst where they show you your ranges and how they match up with other people in the profession and stuff. And it's not to say, you're bad or you're deficient or something like that, but there's an idea of, oh, lots of other people doing this as job or pursuing ministry in that case, lots of other people doing this, here are where their scores tend to be. So knowing that, are there areas that you might want to work on improving or developing, building those skills? And these are all good questions to think about because these are things you want to be writing about in the related assignment. You might also understand it as this is a question of where are you now versus where do you want to be by the time that you finish your program. So as you go about taking this assessment, don't take too long on your answers. It's something where you can overthink, you can try and kind of game the test. Almost all of these tests, they want you to look at it and take the first answer that comes to mind. With the idea that's going to be the least unbiased, the most natural, the most reflective of where you are. And I would even say, don't worry too much about the score total. Tests are all sorts of things. Intelligence tests, lots of people, if they study for it, if they take the exam more than once, they can deliberately boost their score. That's not so much that they're getting smarter, but that they are learning that test. And this is another one of those reasons why you don't want to just keep taking it over and such. You will just want to take it once and say, okay, so according to the things this test is valuing or trying to assess, is there something about myself that I realize that I might want to do something with? Whether it's be happy about it and not spend lots of energy on it, or something potentially you want to improve, or just be aware, okay, well, maybe I see this differently than some other people working on this. Now, you do want to write down your total score and your sub-scores. You could just print out the page after you've done the results, but I'd recommend writing it down because I've had a number of students tell me they had to retake it because they didn't write down the results and then the computer crashed or they closed the web browser or something. And then they got different scores the next time and they had to rewrite part of the paper. So just write down your total score and your sub-scores. And then think about, okay, are there any scores that you want to improve? And do I have any strong reactions to that? So your test results are going to come in a couple areas. And one of these is going to be transformational leadership. We've got a number of sub areas. And you're also going to have personal confidence. All right. How do you feel about yourself and what you do? And how are your scores through the metric of transformational leadership, which is a aesthetic or model of leaders as changing the people that they work with. As you go through the course, you'll learn some related theories and everything. But basically, these two larger areas. One is, how do you feel about what you are doing? And the other is, well, how are you interacting or prioritizing interacting with other people from the measure of potential transformational leader? And the instructions will refer to this table here from the Chisholm book, the table of leadership attributes relevant for D&P graduates. Now, I do want to repeat that we don't want to get too caught up in the results here, because there are some things where you could look and say, okay, well, the healthiest psychological response to one of these things is to not do this all the time. Or, you're aware that there's certain trade-offs you have to work with. There's only a limited amount of time, so perhaps you'll let people be on their own sometimes and you'll give them a little independence and stuff. So it's not at all saying you must be a top score in all this, but it's a way of getting an idea of where you are with reference to a model. So if you're working to actively improve your qualifications adherence, or how well you fit this particular picture of a transformational leader, well, the scores are a guide. So let's talk about the next step, which is how you might cite and write about your own results on this test. And this is something that I get a lot of questions on from students, because it's usually not something where you've been writing about yourself in APA style up to this point. And I just went through and took the test quickly, and I got a 75 out of 90. Now, normally, if I got a 75 out of 90 on some academic test, I'd be like, oh, what did I do wrong? I'm a terrible student. Well, this is just through this self-evaluation, getting an idea of where things are relative to where they could be, and then you decide how you feel about that. Now, going back to our earlier categories here, I've had people submit papers and say, oh, I got a 3 out of 10 on emotional intelligence. That's great. 2 years ago, I got a 1, and so I've improved. And that's good. The context can matter, especially in your subjective interpretation. Also, you can have something like, say, participate in partnerships with patients and others by negotiating with patients. Well, if you're working in the kind of clinical model where you don't really see a lot of follow-up and you're trying to treat as many people as possible, you might get your score and say, yeah, I see where I am there, but that's totally a reflection of the reality of the environment that I'm in right now. But it's still good to know that, in certain other conditions, there's probably room to grow here. So again, record these thoughts as you go, because it will make it easier when you're writing up the assignment. So I'll just read some of the feedback here. I think that the middle ground here, the middle score band, okay, you have the potential to do much better. While you've built the foundation of effective leadership, there's your opportunity to improve your skills and become the best you can be. Examine the areas where you lost points and determine what you can do to develop skills in these areas. I would actually take that advice for every category, and then you will have no loss of things to say, and you won't have any trouble meeting the length requirements, because if you're looking at everything as there's an opportunity to improve, like I say you got the maximum score, you're like, yes, but I don't feel that way. I can see opportunities to do this further. Well, talk about that. Tell us them. All right. So let's look at my own scores here. Now, again, I took this quickly, and each of these, except for the last one, providing support and stimulation, except for that one, they're all out of 10. And then providing support and stimulation is out of 20 possible. All right, so let's take a look at how we might talk about that. Well, if you're just referring to the test, you'd cite it like this. I completed the Mind Tools N period, D period leadership self-evaluation. It's N period, D period, because if you go to that web page, there is no date saying, oh, updated on this year or something. So N period, D period, non datum, which just means not dated in Latin. If you're referring to the test itself, again, like my Mind Tools N period, D period results showed. And that's the normal author date format. Now, in this case, Mind Tools N period, D period that's just identifying the test that you took explicitly. The results, the reason why the citation isn't after the results is that other people can't just go and look up your results online. They're not published publicly or something like that. They're not even saved unless you save a copy to your computer. But that's how you'd refer to your results. And if you introduce that at the beginning of the paragraph, then you can just say, yeah, my result of this without my result of that, without needing to bring up the citation again. Now, if you are discussing your score, again, the scores aren't retrievable by someone else. So here's how you would write about it. My emotional intelligence score of 7 out of 10 shows significant room for improvement. After seeing my score, I realized that I have not prioritized this area, but will work to improve it in the future. So you don't have to just report it. You can also discuss it, elaborate on it, and in fact, you should, because the assignment instructions say to do that. Now, emotional intelligence is capitalized because we're using this as a proper noun. This refers specifically to that section of the test. And so that's why we capitalize the E at the beginning of emotional and the I at the beginning of intelligence. And how would we reference that in our references list? Just like you see on the right, Mind Tools, how good are your leadership skills? Ooh, sorry, I am spotting a quick typo. I am going to fix that, and then I'm going to reshare my screen with you. Just a moment. What I noticed was that there was a missing period. And since we'd like to show you a complete and accurate example, we will do just that. There we go. And this follows the normal format. Who wrote it? When was it published? What's it called? And how do you find it? So Mind Tools is the organization that claims the corporate authorship here. There's no listed date on the page, so that's why it's N period, D period. The title of the page is How Good Are Your Leadership Skills? And then the link to get to it. All right, now the assignment also asks that you refer to the KISM textbook. So here's how you would cite it in text. KISM 2019 stated that, or I scored highly in this area, which KISM 2019 stated is an essential characteristic for a NURS leader, or I plan to work on improving whatever area as recommended by KISM 2019. And I've given you the reference there. Now, I often get questions about whether or not Doctor of Nursing practice should be capitalized. And there are two answers there. One is that you're probably not going to be graded down for writing Doctor of Nursing practice in lowercase, but it is actually a proper noun. It's not just talking about, oh, a nursing degree that happens to be about practice. That is the name of a very specific degree. Just like, for example, I have a Doctor of Philosophy, and that's not saying like philosophy as the major kind of thing. That is a particular type of doctorate, the PhD. So the Doctor of Nursing Practice degree, Doctor of Nursing Practice is a proper noun, which is why I am recommending that you capitalize it here. And again, the same format. Who wrote it? When was it published? What's it called? And how do I find it? All right, this next area is going to be where we go a little hands-on. And we're going to talk about how to add synthesis to your writing as part of meeting the expectations for this assignment. Now, we'll look at the specific instructions in a little bit, but I want to talk about synthesis. You heard me speak earlier about how synthesis is a key part of writing at the graduate level. And so let's talk about what exactly we mean by synthesis. Synthesis, broadly speaking, is when we discuss, rather than simply report, evidence and argumentation. What does this mean together? How does this compare? What are we going to do with that? It's how we examine the relationships between different points of evidence. And synthesis is also used to answer questions like, well, what do these things mean when put together? Or how do you as the author interpret what you presented? You can give facts like, oh, so-and-so has a net worth of X. Well, is that good or bad? What does it mean for the context? If you said someone has an annual income of, let's say, $15,000 per year. Now, in the US, that's going to put you down somewhere near the poverty line, even if it's a family of one. If we go to much of the third world, that's a pretty good salary to be having. And so that's one of those examples where context matters. And you could say, well, while this income would be below the poverty line in the United States, for their local area, this actually puts them in one of the upper percentiles. So that is one of those things where you interpret the data that's being given. And again, we have a whole 1-hour webinar that's available that I strongly recommend watching if you haven't seen it before. So let's now delve into the specifics for this assignment. So this is coming out of the Nursing 701 class. And we're looking specifically at the week 3 assignment, Leadership, Self-Assessment, and Potential Mentors. So let's just walk through these instructions for a little bit. Doctorally prepared nursing leaders must participate in continuous self-evaluation. This begins with knowing your leadership strengths and areas for further development. This activity is designed to identify these areas in each of you. Additionally, you will begin the process of identifying a potential professional mentor. All right, now the next instructions are about going and taking that assessment I showed you my results for. And then you want to write a 3-page paper. And that's 3 pages of content. So not counting the reference sheet, not counting the title sheet, 3 pages. That's not a lot, but it's enough where you need to be careful about not writing too much because again, it's only supposed to be 3 pages of body content. So we've got 2 sections to do that, divided into 2 pages. First section, we have 2 sections, 1 of 2 pages, 1 page in length. So the first section, we need to synthesize the leadership self-evaluation results by answering the following questions. Describe the results of the self-assessment. State, do you feel this is a valid representation of where you are as a nursing leader? Talk about the attributes of effective leadership. With the specific instruction, you should be doing that through the lens of what is listed on the KISM textbook. This table, by the way, is the one that you saw in an earlier slide. What characteristics do you feel you already possess? What do you feel you need to improve on? And then who do you know of in a leadership role that possesses the characteristics of effective leadership? Now, this is going to be about 2 pages. So let's talk about how to divide this up. So describing the results of your self-assessment, that's going to be a couple sentences, your overall score, and then just listing your individual scores. What about the next one? Do you feel this is a valid representation of where you are as a nursing leader? I would recommend taking these each in turn and give your total score first, talk about whether you think the total score is a valid representation, and then list your individual scores and how you feel about those. And that will get you a good sized paragraph. Next, if we launch into what are the attributes of effective leadership, Then you have the opportunity to say, okay, well, here's what KISM says they are. And based on the scores that I have, this is what the test suggests about what I have. And then do you agree with that or not? Yeah, I might go and say, but wait, my score for this type of leadership is pretty low, but I think I'm being a pretty darn good reader. And then explain and that, give some examples or evidence to support that. What characters do you feel you need to improve on? Now, you might even say, well, I got the score. I feel I'm a great leader, but I'm going to keep on working on it because I see how that's important. And then this, who do you know of in a leadership role? That's probably going to be a separate paragraph. You talk about their characteristics, some examples of their exercising those characteristics, why you admire that, etc. Now remember, synthesis, we want to be creating new meaning by combining and applying information. And so you can look at this in part by taking some of these questions and going beyond and saying, okay, how or why is this important? Or how will you go about doing this improvement? And so you use that to start develop. Don't just answer the question. You want to do that, answer these questions in the prompt directly, but then make sure you follow up to give additional detail. And for this last one, well, based on your admiring this person, and what actions might you take? Is this someone where you just want to, have coffee with them and pick their mind and learn from them? Is this something where you want to do more active mentorship? Are you perhaps pursuing a path that they did before? I used to teach intensives for DNP students who were working on their doctoral projects, to basically jumpstart getting the prospectus done. And my colleague there was telling me that, she had gone to nursing school as a single mother, and she worked on her MSN and her DNP as she was teaching and working and being a parent and everything like that. And because of that, some of the students said, oh gosh, I wasn't planning on sharing this, but actually that's kind of what I'm doing. Can you tell me more? How did you overcome this? How did you balance that? And so there may be some things that you say, okay, based on my seeing that this person has or is in a position that I want, what will I do? And then separately, we have this section about mentorship. Now, mentorship is something where you could be looking at this person that you admire as your mentor, or it could be a separate person. And you're asked basically about, your ideal, that's if you could have anyone as a mentor, who would it be? What characteristics do they possess that you feel you would benefit from? And, if I was going to be picking mentors in my own area, there's a senior professor that I worked with and that would see at conferences and stuff. Sadly passed away since then. But he was a great mentor. He freely gave advice, generous recommendations, very precise instructions and suggestions and everything. And he would go to bat and advocate for you. And, to me, that makes an ideal mentor. And I list out all those things. And also it's just warm and fun to hang out with. And when you're looking for hard advice, it doesn't hurt if it's someone where you trust them because you like hanging around them. Now, unfortunately, he's not available, and you may have your ideal, they're geographically separated, or they work the opposite schedule, or they're too busy. So the next thing is, well, okay, here are ones that you might solicit as being mentors and your rationale. Why them? Okay, so we also have the rubric here. And so let's take a look at how things are being weighted here. Now, 10% of the grade is going just for basic writing standard. Is there good grammar, punctuation, etc. And another 10% is it within the prescribed length of 3 pages of content and in a good APA format? Okay, so that's 20% of the grade for those two things we were talking about. So the other 80% is going to be, have you done all these things? And have you given a thoughtful introspection that's analyzing yourself? synthesis of self-evaluation results. So don't just report, okay, well, what do these mean to you and what will you do with them? And then covers all the attributes of effective leadership as defined by KISM. Okay, we're going to come back to that in a moment. And include at least one mentor with a description of characteristics and rationale. I would go so far as saying that you will probably cover your basis as a little bit better on that at least one mentor thing if you discuss two, because there are different things that you'll think about with these people. If I was going to pick a different scholar to serve as my mentor today, and for my field, my dissertation advisor, Dr. Highmark, wonderful woman, very intelligent, lots of experience, and a memory for names like nobody's business. And if I had followed her specific path, she was a specialist in Balinese gamelan and shadow play, and was going to Bali, then she would have been the perfect mentor for that. And she was for another student who went that path. I went to a different island in the Southern Indian Ocean to do my dissertation research. So that might be something where I say, well, even though her experience doesn't parallel, here are all these reasons why she's a great mentor. And she was my dissertation chair and advised stuff. And there's some things that she gave me advice on that many years later, I'm still following up. So let's talk about that second item, because I think people are pretty good at the reporting the results. And you often don't have trouble saying things. You want to organize it so it's coherent when you say, well, not just this made me upset or this didn't surprise me, but okay, well, what are you doing about it next? But that discussing it through the lens of effective leadership as defined by KISM. So let's back up now, and we're going to go look at that table I showed you. Which, by the way, if you're going to cite that, that's coming from KISM 2019, page 38. So here we have a list of 11 leadership attributes. And in the results that you have here, you'll see that there's some collapsing of things here. That there are 2 overarching categories and 8 individual items here, or areas where they combine the scores. But there are 11 leadership attributes here. So some of this may not map on directly. Empathy, for example, that's probably going to be part of emotional intelligence. But does it encompass everything that emotional intelligence tracks? No, there are other nuances in there, and you can talk about that. Now, for example, trustworthy here. Maintain confidences in a practice setting, such as not sharing information about other team members when issues arise. That is a great thing to have, and especially for people that you work with year over year. Now, there may be areas where when you are in leadership where the responsible thing is to report. So you might say, well, hold on. This score says that I should be more confidential about that, but I answered that knowing that that kind of thing came up. And that's not about not having trust. That's, and not maintaining confidence. That's the liability and responsibility here. So there may be things where you say, well, I scored this, but here's why I believe I have or I fulfill this leadership attribute that Chisholm 2019 cites as important. And let's talk about the role model thing. Now, depending on where you are, you may not be in a situation where there is ample opportunity to be a role model. If you're the only nurse working on a shift and you're doing everything and there's no one to be directly modeling to, that might be an area where you say, well, I've demonstrated being a good role model at this previous job that I had. And when I was scoring this, when I was picking a score, when I took this test, I was thinking about my current context. Well, I don't have a chance to do that, so I scored that low. And so again, this is something that you can talk about, and you want to make reference to both things. You would have writing like, although my test score showed that, I believe that I do fulfill KISM 2019's and description of a good role model, because when I had this opportunity, I was giving a good example and I trained all these new graduate nurses and oriented them, et cetera, et cetera. So make sure that you develop that. Now, we would normally go further here and take these elements and copy and paste them into the outline, but we've talked through those in some detail, and I see a couple of messages from people saying that they need to leave because their lunch break is ending. So we're going to end early here with just that discussion there. If you want to go the next step further and start this assignment, I'd say begin by copy and pasting these assignment instructions, each of these bulleted list things, copy and paste them into the APA course paper template, and then just start making sub-bullets and filling in, like filling your score results. And then you can fill in, okay, what I think about them for each. And then as you put in your short answers for that, you start giving yourselves all the ingredients you need to quickly write out a paragraph in response to these things. And before you know it, you'll have all of the 2 pages for this section and all of the 1 page for this last one. So thanks for joining us during the lunch hour. Have a great rest of the day and feel free to contact us with questions.